Chapter 4. Fragments of the Past. Yumi looked all around her, somewhat perplexed. The young girl was convinced that she was a genuine expert on virtual worlds. After all, she had experienced many adventures on the Yoko, and not too long ago, she had been to the first city thanks to some strange machines in Brussels. But this place was very bizarre, or rather, to be more precise, it was normal. It didn't contain the bright colors typically found in a cartoon, and the sky didn't seem to be an unrealistic shade of blue either. The young girl was curling on the street in a more usual city. Her city. Yumi knew this narrow back road surrounding tall buildings very well. It wasn't far from Caddick. "Welcome," Odd greeted her. Her friend had the appearance of a cat boy that he usually adopted while on the Yoko. He was dressed in purple overalls, his hands were covered with clawed gloves, and behind him swung a long tail. Yumi had also experienced a transformation. Her hair was held up by small pins, her face was covered in white makeup, and she was dressed in a short kimono. Her feet were covered with traditional Japanese socks, known as tabi, and she was wearing a pair of wooden gaita sandals. The obi sash that surrounded her waist hid the tops of her razor-sharp fans. "Do you know where we are?" Odd asked her, while he jumped from side to side with the agility of a cat. Yumi furrowed her eyebrows. Auric had maybe been right. Odd had been acting strange for some time now. How could he not know this street? The girl motioned for him to follow her and walked from the road onto a wide avenue. Few cars drove around and there were even fewer pedestrians. The sky was largely gloomy as if the sun had barely begun to rise. It was dawn. Yumi approached a passerby with the groggy eyes reading a recently purchased newspaper. "Excuse me." She bit her tongue for a moment. What would this man say if he saw her dressed like a geisha? But he completely ignored her, as if she didn't exist. Unsure of herself, Yumi tried to give him a tap to get his attention, but her fingers passed right through him without managing to touch him. She had become a ghost. "He can't see me or hear me," she murmured. Odd squatted down in front of the man to get a glimpse of the front page of his newspaper. "Now I know what day it is. 1st of June, 1994. Does that mean anything?" Yumi covered her mouth with her hands. "Even you should know that, idiot! In 5 days, Hopper will take Alita to the Yoko to hide there. In other words, it'll be the start of all our adventures." "Are you saying that this is a reconstruction of that moment?" "Looks that way," nodded Yumi. "Maybe Hopper wanted to show Alita something important. By the way, where is she? Why hasn't she arrived yet?" "The communication with the others is blocked," Odd said, shaking his head. "The electricity's down at the Hermitage, and Alita's transfer was interrupted." Yumi examined his face fixedly, taken aback. How could he know these things? Odd seemed to realize that he had said too much. "Jeremy told me just after you arrived here," he hurried to add, "and our communication was lost afterwards, but—" The young boy extended a claw, pointing his finger to the other side of the street. "See that lady walking softly over there? Don't you think she looks a lot like Professor Hertz?" It did appear to be her, without a doubt, even though she seemed younger, with brown hair mixed with a little gray. She was dressed in a shirt and jeans, and had a slim physique. She didn't resemble the calm professor the children knew. Yumi and Odd crossed the avenue, but the woman continued on her way without noticing their presence. She advanced with a lowered head and a busy look on her face. "This is nothing but a recording," Yumi observed. "The same thing happened to Alita when she visited the first level of the journal. We can't do or say anything to anyone, only observe what happened 10 years ago." Professor Hertz arrived at a small bar at the corner of the street. The owner was washing the bar, and the smell of recently baked croissants fresh out of the oven began to float through the air. Yumi was shocked. In the virtual world, generally speaking, there was no sense of smell or taste. How had Hopper managed to reconstruct this place in such detail? Another person was also in the bar, a woman with short blonde hair and a pair of very dark, enormous sunglasses that hid the majority of her face. She was sitting at a table alone. "Major Steinbeck," greeted the woman as she stood up. "Agent Dado," the professor replied, with a neutral tone and unexpressive face. "It's been a long time." Hertz didn't seem at all happy about this meeting. She ordered a coffee from the waiter and took the chair on the other side of the table, facing the mystery woman. Odd and Yumi sat on the ground near the two women to listen to them. "Her name is Steinbeck," the young girl murmured. "Do you remember what Alita saw on the first level? Professor Hertz is the same woman that helped Hopper escape Carthage." Yumi couldn't believe her eyes. Professor Hertz was an officer in the army! The waiter brought the coffee, walking through Yumi while doing so. The young girl shuddered. It was all a crazy illusion. She remained hopeful that Jeremy would return as soon as possible. She wanted to get out of here. Dido took several sips of her coffee during the dead silence. "You've been pretty busy these last few years," she said while leaning forward, her eyes riveted to Hertz's. "What are you trying to say?" "I know that you and Hopper live here, and that you have continued to work on Project Carthage. I know that you have rebuilt the first city. And not just that, I also know how you enter it. I have access codes, and by using old projects, we rebuilt the necessary equipment in Brussels to connect us to it. When running away, you left behind a series of notes." Hertz trembled. She knocked over her cup on the table and the dark liquid dripped onto the floor. Yumi jumped to her feet to avoid the mess, but the drops went right through her without leaving a trace. So it was this woman, Dido, who had created the scanners in the apartment in Brussels. It wasn't the work of Hopper, but of Dido and her men in black. In any case, the professor retorted, the notes won't help you. Adults cannot use the scanners. Dido nodded and ignored the subjects as if it didn't interest her. I asked to see you, she murmured, to make something clear. I don't want to declare war against neither you nor Hopper. Seriously, the woman replied after having studied her with uncertainty for several moments. Things have changed, said Dido. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Cold War has ended. Project Carthage cost us an arm and a leg, and it has only created millions of problems. I think those on top are starting to fear it. The first city demonstrated itself to be completely uncontrollable, and if it is made operational, it could turn against us. In fact, the whole project is much too risky. Then, when you escaped from our base, Hopper destroyed the prototype of the first city. After that, I erased the memories of those who had collaborated with you. You mean those who transformed Project Carthage into a weapon? Nothing remains of those memories anymore, replied Dido, making a vague gesture with her hand as if the subject was of no importance. And I want the world to completely forget the existence of Carthage in the first city. What do you mean, Dido? Said Hertz, standing. Speak with Hopper. Tell me where the supercomputer that you have constructed is located, and let me destroy it. I will erase your minds of certain and confidential information, only the most dangerous details, and then leave you to live in peace. You too, as well as Alita. I'm offering you salvation. Out of the question, Hertz burst out. Be smart about this, Dido insisted. You know to what extent I can be dangerous. Something fell on Yumi's head. The young girl turned towards Odd, her yes shooting daggers. Really? You think this is a good time to be throwing things at me? I didn't do anything, the boy protested. Yumi looked at her feet where the object had just hit her had landed. It was a small sky blue box made of plastic that somewhat resembled a control box. Under a small screen were 3 red buttons. 2 of them were in the shape of 2-way arrows, one turned towards the right and the other towards the left, like the buttons for rewinding and fast-forwarding on a DVD. The third came with a small label, Free Exploration. Yumi suddenly sensed that the coffee dripping onto the floor had smoked the material of her kimono. Embarrassed, she stood up and passed the box to Odd to try to squeeze it out, but the stain quickly began to dry up and disappeared in several seconds. Hey! Cried Yumi, surprised. Odd didn't even turn to look at her. He seemed absorbed in his thoughts. He finally spoke. This remote controls a navigation interface. Hopper programmed his diary so that he could highlight the events that were most important. We can move through them however we want through the city and across the days that are saved. This is the free exploration. Or we can jump directly to the interesting things, or go back if we miss something. The young girl couldn't believe her ears. Her friend had never understood a word of technology before. Why did he seem so sure of himself now, like Mr. Know-It-All? These two are continuing to talk, but they aren't saying anything important. I propose that we move forward to see what else happened. Before Yumi had the time to protest, Odd pressed the button and the world started to dissolve around them. Dido and Professor Hertz started to become transparent, then completely disappeared. The walls and the roof, however, became darker and finally rained on them like a waterfall of colors. Yumi started to feel vertigo, and she focused on Odd, his purple clothes and cattail, the only elements that were still solid and real. Odd, she murmured, falling to her feet. It'll only last a moment, said Odd, taking her by the hand. It's only a system update. Huh? Since when did you start talking like Jeremy? The images then recovered their clarity, and Yumi saw that everything had changed around the kids. They found themselves in the old factory on the island. To be more precise, they were on the 3rd underground floor, the lowest level and the most secret. The room was large and shone with a pale blue light. Almost the entire available space was occupied by a tall, dark metal cylinder with a surface covered in strange golden hieroglyphics. This was the supercomputer that Lyoko's existence depended on. Yumi was so used to seeing it shut down in the dark that she now felt a quivering of emotions that was spreading through her whole body in spurts. She turned towards Odd with a smile and saw that the child had eyes round like saucers and was trembling like jelly. You okay? She asked him. Look, he replied. Hopper! Hidden behind the metal of the computer, Alita's father was crouched down, working with a big screwdriver and a laptop at his side, placed on the ground. He was wearing a lab coat and had a long beard and a pair of round glasses. His face was very serious and seemed emaciated from lack of sleep. A noise could be heard, and Hopper raised his head. Someone else had just entered the room through the lift that connected the underground levels with the main floor of the factory. It was Professor Hertz, dressed in the same way she was during her meeting with Dido. Yumi looked at the control box that Odd was clenching in his hands. On the screen appeared the text, 1st of June, 1994, 4:30 p.m. They were on the same day and had only moved forward a few hours. Xana was shaking inside of Odd's body. He had worked so hard, acting in the shadows, hiding himself, and he was now only a step away from his triumph. He was finally before the supercomputer, the bridge to Lyoko. This was a different Lyoko, the Lyoko of 1994, but maybe only from there would it even be possible to surpass the barriers of the sandbox and access the real virtual world in which he could recover his strength. The portion of Xana inhabiting the body of Eva Skinner advised him to wait a bit and remain very attentive. Yumi had been on the verge of discovering him when he had been carried away by his emotions and when he figured out the box to navigate the mirror too quickly. He needed to take into account that Otto had only a pea brain. But he was almost there. Lyoko! And if his calculations were correct, Hannibal Mago was about to arrive at the real factory, at the real supercomputer. Xana immediately realized that Caddick was under the surveillance of very sophisticated spy microcameras, and he had carried out some research. His capacities on the internet were almost unlimited, and he hadn't been slow to investigate, to the very last detail, Mago and the Green Phoenix. Clearly, Xana had preferred not to say a word to the children, given that in the future the Green Phoenix could become a strong ally. This stupid kid, Yumi, had seized him by the arm, forcing him to focus on Hopper and Hertz. The professor listened to several sentences and then straightened up, shaking the screwdriver in the air as if it were a weapon. "It's not possible," he cried. "There was no way for Dito to know that we reconstructed the first city. We kept the secret absolutely hidden. It was our last hope to transform the project into a weapon for peace." "We should think carefully about our next step," said Hertz, while she brushed past his shoulder. "Dito let slip a very important clue. She said that she erased the memories of our men. Doesn't that tell you anything?" "A memory-snatching machine," whispered Hopper. "Someone sold the plans to our machine." "Yes," Hertz confirmed. "We built it to fill the virtual world with real-world information. But if we used it with the polarity reverse, its effect would be precisely that of erasing people's memories. It can't be a simple coincidence that Dito possesses a similar device. There was only one person among us who knew of the existence of the sandbox, the first city, and the memory-snatching machine. And that person is Walter Stern." Yumi leapt up, placing her hands over her mouth, horrified. "Lorik's father?" she cried. "But that's not possible. It must be a mistake. I don't believe it. It's impossible!" Odd also had jumped to his feet. "Look, Hopper's completely flipping out." Hopper began pacing around the supercomputer room in big steps, his face obscured by a grave and sinister expression. "Then there's only one thing that I can do," he declared at last. "Prepare an escape plan." "What are you talking about?" Hertz demanded, regarding him intensely. "Alita and I should leave here. I will take code down and divide it into several parts to prevent anyone from reconstructing it. And then I will escape with my daughter." "Code down?" whispered Yumi. "What's that?" Xana hadn't the slightest idea. He continued to listen to Hertz very attentively. "You can't do that. All that we've accomplished up until now. The creation of Lyoko and code down. It'll all be completely lost." "I will leave several tracks. I will hide information that only Alita and I will be able to follow." "Why Alita?" asked Hertz, all while shaking her head. "She's still so young." "Think about it," smiled Hopper. "The men in black want to find me, and I don't know how much time we still have. They could capture me, but I'm sure that I'll be able to save Alita one way or another. So, when she is older, she can learn what happened. I plan to create a virtual diary. I will use my memories, yours. Whatever information I can need to trace out a map that Alita will be capable of interpreting." Hertz nodded her head. "And me?" she asked. "What should I do?" "Call the friends working with us and have a meeting with them," Hopper said after thinking for an instant. "Invent whatever kind of excuse. For example, that Walter wants us to fire us all. When everyone's together, use the memory-snatching machine on them. They will forget everything. Lyoko, the factory, the computer. They will be safe. Once this is done, you and I will speak face-to-face with Walter. And finally, I will run far away from here." "And what will we do with Lyoko?" Hertz asked him. "I will shut it down. I have no other option. Xana is becoming more and more dangerous. The virus that got into the first city could make him suddenly become crazy. It's a bug, a programming error, and it's possible that Xana wasn't affected. But all the human training that we submitted him to over the months could also slip away. And well, I don't know what could happen." Xana remained there, listening to the conversation, mouth open, hidden inside the virtual version of Odd. Virus? Programming error? Training? What was Hopper talking about? Next, without warning, an image dating from numerous years ago reappeared in his mind. In general, he held these memories far off in his mind, hidden away in a sure but distant corner of his digital memory. But all at once, he saw the image of Alita before his eyes, although not the child that he had known in reality, the friend of Eva Skinner, but the Alita that he had met a long time ago, the one who played with him in the deserted city. Xana had a very different character then, and he played with Alita in the parks, transforming himself into a multitude of amusing animals, and would wait for her at the doors of the Great Wall, every afternoon, up until the day when Alita no longer came to play with him. That was why on this day, many years ago, his friend didn't come to meet him like always. Hopper had prevented it. Xana exploded with rage. Yumi felt a violent hit that threw her to the side. In front of her, Hopper and Hertz continued to pronounce the same sentences that they said 10 years earlier, but the young girl was in no condition to listen anymore. She rolled over. Her friend, Odd, fell to his knees, and he grasped his throat with both hands. He seemed to be suffocating. From his mouth came a black smoke so dense that it blasted Yumi, throwing her to the ground. "Xana!" she murmured, shocked. The young girl knew the smoke too well. It was the same that she had seen come out from the mouth of William Dunbar, one of her school friends, when Xana had taken control of his body. Odd collapsed. The cloud of smoke started to condense into a breathtaking whirlwind that took form bit by bit until it became solid. The young girl leapt to her feet. The box fell to the ground. She had to recover and advance to the next part of the recording, far away from here. She needed to escape, but... "Don't even think about moving," a young voice spoke, freezing her in place. The smoke had disappeared. In its place a boy had appeared. He was exactly like William Dunbar, with dark hair that was slightly long, a straight nose, and a self-confident expression. He was a little taller than Yumi and had an athletic physique. Who are you?" "You already said my name before. You know me. I am Xana, and I am back."